You're listening to Bigger Than Belief, real stories about real faith with real people whose belief is unbelievable. I'm your host, Adam Duxter. Thanks for listening to Bigger Than Belief, where we share real stories about real faith and real people. Today is Thursday, July 9th, and we're going to talk about real hope. Seriously, this week's guest, Kaycee Stanley, is the founder of the Real Hope Project, a Minnesota-based nonprofit that's helping foster children find their forever families through the power of storytelling. For Kaycee, it started as something simply weighing on her heart, which honestly I feel is super relatable. Like, we've all been there where you can see an issue and you feel personally called to do something about it so badly, but you simply just don't know where to start or the right people to talk to or the right ways to maybe take those first steps. And it can be hard when you're in that position to actually know how to make a difference in the problem, because the problem itself could seemingly be growing by the day, especially when it's outside the realm of anything you typically would be working on. Well, here's what Kaycee did and what the Real Hope Project did. They built a multi-state network that has since, in the last 10 years, found homes for hundreds of kids. But when it was years ago, just that issue weighing on her heart, she got more no's than yeses. And it was only because of her mission, her determination, and her faith that they've gotten this far. And I think, honestly, that's something we could all take something from. On this week's episode, we also dive into the realities of foster care in America, why family matters so much, and how ordinary people can play a role in changing a child's future. Whether you're passionate about adoption, curious about foster care, or simply wondering what it looks like to follow God's calling when the path ahead isn't clear, I think you're going to be encouraged by this conversation. Hey, before we dive in, if this is your first time listening to Bigger Than Belief and you like this episode, please take a second to rate us 5 stars wherever you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Simply doing that helps us grow way more than you would possibly realize. Also, we release new episodes every Thursday, so please click that follow if you haven't already so you don't miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, a simple thumbs up or even a comment helps us with the algorithm, helps us grow. And if you really like this episode and you're listening on a podcast platform, please consider sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review in the platform wherever you're listening. Simply, again, our mission here is to share real stories about real faith and real people in a way that's tangible, authentic, raw, real, and easy to understand. And you as the listener are everything. The only way that people hear this is because of you. So thank you so much to those of you who tune in week after week. We could not do it without you. Here is Kaycee Stanley. Well, we now welcome on a very special guest, someone who I'm really excited to sit down with because the world you work in is just so fascinating to me. You have braved the downtown traffic to be here early on a Wednesday or Thursday morning. It's Kaycee Stanley, founder of Real Hope. And Kaycee, thank you again just for making time for us.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Your story is so fascinating. If you've been a WCCO watcher, because you've appeared on our Sunday morning show before.
Yeah, once or twice.
But this is really an opportunity to get to know your story really, really well. And I do want to start with Real Hope. That is the work that you do. For people who've never heard of Real Hope, what is like the quick elevator pitch that you give people? Because I'm sure you've given it before.
Yes, yeah. So basically, in a nutshell, what the Real Hope Project does is we make videos of kids in foster care who are waiting to be adopted. And then we use those videos to find a forever family for every child.
You've been doing this now for like a decade, right?
10 years, yeah.
Is that weird to say?
Yes. I actually don't believe it when I say it. I say it because I know it's factually true, but internally I'm like, that can't be right.
Your story with the Real Hope Project, again, 10 years ago, but where does your story start? I want to start by talking about you and just kind of your Minnesota story or just kind of your origin story, so to speak. How was growing up for you? I mean, I'm curious how you just wind up in this career.
Yes. Yeah. So, Minnesota girl. I grew up in Twig, Minnesota, if you've ever heard of Twig. It's 20 minutes outside Duluth, so a tiny little town near Duluth. And grew up in an amazing, wonderful family, and I was just surrounded by adoption in my life. So my best friend in elementary school was adopted. My youth pastor at my church adopted his little girl, and I was very involved with their family and was always babysitting this little girl. I have an uncle who's like informally adopted. There was just adoption kind of threaded throughout my life. And then in addition to that, I always grew up with this deep understanding that though I'm not, formally legally adopted into my biological family, I am adopted as a child of God. And that was just like a big part of my identity and my formation is that I have been adopted as a daughter of God. And so adoption was just always a part of my heart, always something that I knew I was called to. And when my husband and I started dating, I told him like, hey, I want to grow my family through adoption. Like, this is going to be something that I do. Is that a deal breaker for you? And he was in, and then we noticed once we got married and we started telling people that we wanted to adopt, we just saw this pretty consistent trend where when we would say we wanted to adopt, we would get lots of like support and excitement, and people would be like, oh, adoption, that's so beautiful, and you guys will be so good at that. But if we said we wanted to adopt from foster care, often we would get a pretty different reaction, and that reaction would be more like, ooh, foster care, I don't know about that. Or like, my cousin's neighbor did foster care, and here's their hard story. And we knew, and we always try to acknowledge that those reactions came from a place of love for us, like people just wanted to know that we knew what we were getting into, which we didn't, for the record, but we did know what we felt like God was calling us to. And so we started dreaming and praying, pretty quickly after we got married. This was 2013, about how do we help to really change the narrative around adoption from foster care. And that's really where Real Hope kind of got started.
But even at that point in 2013, the thought wasn't, hey, this could be a full-time job, right?
No. Yeah, at that time in 2013, we were like, well, we'll adopt. We'll do what we feel like God is calling us to do. We'll adopt from foster care. And hopefully that will change the narrative in our little sphere of influence, and that'll be great. But at the time, I was a youth pastor. And I was just seeing that the church has such a beautiful heart for kids who need families. Like, churches do missions trips to orphanages overseas and compassion child sponsorship programs and all these like really beautiful things for kids who need families. But when we think of kids who need families, when we think of caring for the orphan and the widow, we often think of like over there in some other country, or we think of babies right here. And both of those are beautiful, but we just don't naturally often think of, oh, there are kids right here in my city who go to my kids' school who need to be adopted. And so we kind of noticed that trend. We knew we would adopt ourselves. And then we started seeing different creative things that different states were doing to find families for kids. And so we are not the first ones to start doing videos for kids who need families. But we saw different places starting to do that. And we thought, gosh, if we could do that and do only that and do that, hopefully like best in the world, and like really highlight these kids in a way that like calls out all the best and most beautiful things that God has put inside of them. Like, what could that do for their stories? And so I was still a youth pastor at the time. We started doing this on the side and volunteering and kind of pulling a board of directors together to make a nonprofit. And that was 2016. And it's just kind of grown and grown from there.
Youth pastoring here in the Twin Cities at that time, or were you still up near Duluth?
Elk River. So
Okay.
like 40 minutes outside the Twin Cities.
I want to take a pretty big step back in your story, because I feel like none of this happens if you don't have some sort of faith foundation, right?
Yes.
I mean, it seems like that's really what shapes you. And you touched on it a little bit, like, hey, I knew I was adopted, in that way. But where does your faith journey start? Was that something that has always been a part of your life?
Yes. Yeah. I grew up in a Christian family. But I would say when I was about 12 is when I really, I would say like encountered God for the first time and like really began to make my walk with Jesus my own. And that really did become not then just like, oh, I grew up in a Christian home. This is important to my parents, so it should be important to me. But like my walk with Jesus became like the foundation of my life. And I had a pretty significant transformation through that. I was a pretty shy, really anxious kid. And then I met Jesus, and I sort of like had this awakening, I guess, of like how he sees me and his love for me. And it just pretty radically transformed who I was, and I became just so passionate about that. And so then throughout middle school, high school, into college, my whole life became about and is still about, I want people to know the love of God, and I want people to know the love of family. And so that's what drew me to become a youth pastor, is I want kids to know Jesus the way that I know Jesus, and be transformed by his love for him the way that I was, and the way that I still am being. And then through my youth pastor years too, saw that I was a youth pastor for almost a decade, so it was about 8 years that I was at this church, and I loved it. But we were in Elk River, which is like a pretty fairly affluent community, really great schools, great systems. We had a pretty thriving youth ministry, if I may say so myself. And I just noticed for those 8 years, like, man, the kids that have healthy families are thriving, and the kids who don't are struggling. And it doesn't really matter how great our schools are, or how vibrant my youth ministry is, or how great our government safety nets are. Like, all of those things are great, but nothing moves the needle the same way that family does. And just saw like, man, God designed kids to exist in the context of family. And that is such a sacred need that is built into us, and when kids don't have it, the impact is devastating. And so that became like my battle cry, is like, we will find families for any kids that we can, because we believe that's the heart of God.
When you say you have an encounter with God, though, when you're 12, or that you meet Jesus, I feel like people who don't have a faith background, they hear that and that sounds super foreign to them.
Yes.
Like, what do you mean you met Jesus? Like, where was he?
Yes.
Was it at a Barnes and Noble? Like, as you're, walking through, and it's like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Or if you don't mind sharing, I mean, because that sounds like a transformational point in your life.
Yes.
Of where things can go one way or the other way.
Yes.
What was that like, and what does that mean to have an encounter like that? Or when you say you meet Jesus, what does that truly mean?
Yes. I do think it's hard to explain if people have not had that similar experience, because it does sound kind of crazy. It sounds kind of bizarre. But I'd grown up in this Christian family. I was involved in my church, all these things, but it was very much just like a cognitive assent. Like, yes, I believe in God. Okay. I believe the Bible is true. Okay. Yes. Like, it was just kind of a more factual, or more headspace kind of experience. And then when I was in about 7th grade, I went to a camp with my church, and just had a night where we were doing worship and prayer time. And I don't really know to this day how to describe it, other than that, like, it was the first time that I really felt in my soul, like, heart doesn't feel like the right word, but like, felt in my soul, the presence of God. And I felt like there were these things then that I prayed for in that moment of like, okay, if this is real, then God, I need you to show me this. Or if this is like, if I'm just kind of making this experience up, like, I need to know that this is you. And so I just remember that night being like, okay, if you're really here, like, if I'm really experiencing God, like, I need somebody to come and like pray for me right now. And then one of my youth leaders came up and was like, I want to pray for you. And I was like, okay. And I just remember this night of sort of like these confirmations happening. And that was the first then of many experiences like that. So I kind of point to that as like, that was sort of this fork in the road moment for me, but then continued to, I think for any of us, like our faith so much depends on how we steward those moments. And so that happened. That's 7th grade. Okay, great. But then I did continue to try to steward that love, like, to continue to grow in that and develop my relationship with God, and have had in the 25 years since then many more experiences and encounters that are like that, but that maybe look all kinds of different ways.
Yeah. And you're not the first guest either to share of something like that, an encounter. And that's why I'm always curious for people what that really means, because we've heard from people who say, hey, it stopped me in my tracks and I almost couldn't breathe in that moment, or it's different for everyone. But I do think that is so worth explaining or just sharing what that moment was like.
Yes.
So then you're in Elk River, you're youth pastoring, you see kind of this need or this kind of gap for kids who have these healthy families and they're doing well, and kids who don't, and there's these issues there.
Yeah.
And you've always had this passion, but how did you physically go about taking the first step to making this a reality? Because I think there's a lot of people who have an idea in their head of a problem that exists, and boy, wouldn't it be great? But then there is a huge gap between that and then like, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
So what was the first step like for you to take that step?
Yeah. Okay. So the inspiration for Real Hope happened in 2016. I was still a youth pastor. I went to a conference with my church staff that was in Colorado. And it's this conference called the Q conference, or now I think it's called Think. It's like Think with a Q at the end.
Nice.
And there's all these different like 8-minute TED Talks on these different topics. And there was one little 8-minute TED Talk about adoption and foster care and what Colorado had started doing. And there was a bunch of different things that were happening in Colorado and different things that they'd done in their child welfare system. But one of them was videos of kids. And I was like, that is it. And I just remember sitting at this conference and it felt like my bones were on fire. Like, I am going to do this. And so the rest of the conference didn't listen to a word anybody said. And I was just like writing out all these plans, got home, told my husband, hey, I think I want to do this. And I want to get this started. And he's awesome. So he was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Then in my mind, I was like, this is going to be awesome. People are going to love this. And like everyone I talk to is going to be so excited about this. And then I started meeting with social workers and just kind of got hit in the face with like, this is going to be way harder than you thought it was going to be.
Why?
I remember meeting with some social workers at a larger county in Minnesota and saying like, here's what I want to do and here's how we're going to do it. And they were like, hey, this is like really well-intentioned, love the heart. There's way too many privacy issues. There's way too many legality issues and confidentiality issues. No one's ever going to let you do this. And like the county attorneys are never going to allow it. It's not going to happen. And I was like so deflated. And then I remember just like, nope, I know that this is what God is calling us to do. So like, there's got to be a way to do it. And I could point to these other, like Colorado's doing it. So there's a way to do it. And there's always been like Wednesday's child news programs that do different, videos of kids. And so it was like, there's precedent. Like this is possible. And so I really had to learn to get my ducks in a row. I was a youth pastor. And so I just didn't have experience in the child welfare system or how to navigate government entities, And so I remember leaving one meeting feeling just like so deflated. This is never going to happen. And then I set up another meeting with one of the private agencies here in Minnesota and sat down with this woman and I was sharing with her what I want to do. And I could tell she was skeptical and she had a lot of questions about like, well, what do you mean that this is going to be like a Christian organization or a faith-based organization? And I really had to like, oh my gosh, what do I mean when I say that? Because she was like, are you going to be proselytizing to these kids? And I was like, no. And kind of had to like clarify even for myself. And I felt like God gave me words to say like, okay, our faith is our why. Our faith is the fuel behind why we do this. But you don't have to be a Christian for us to make a video of you. You don't have to be a Christian to adopt kids. You don't have to agree with us to be a part of this mission. And so she really, in asking me some hard questions, helped me clarify, like, what am I trying to do? And what am I saying when I say that we're a Christian organization? And by the end of the meeting, I kind of told her what I wanted to do. And then I also told her, we want to make these videos, then we want to share them at churches. And she said, why churches? And I was like, well, because I'm a believer and I believe the church was called to do this. And she was like, okay, well, our agency's tried to go to churches before and people don't care. People don't want to get involved. Wow. And I was so like, oh man, that is so sad that has been her experience. But all that to say, by the end of the meeting, she was like, look at you, you're going to do this. I think this is going to happen. And she was like, let's try it. I'll send you a kid. And so she got us connected with our first kid that we got to do a video for in 2016. And then it just started slowly snowballing. So that first year we did 3 videos. And then the next year it was like 20 and then 40 and then 50. And it just sort of slowly grown and grown from there.
Did you have like the camera and editing experience or storytelling experience? Or
No.
was that also part of this where it's like we're figuring out like physically what we're doing as we go?
Totally. It was very much building the plane while it's already flying was the strategy, is still the strategy, I think. So I was a pretty good storyteller, more just from being a youth pastor and like speaking to kids and needing to find ways to like not lose them after 2 minutes. So I was good at storytelling, but I had none of the technical skills of videography. But one of our good friends, his name is Dan, he was the videographer at our wedding. And Dan was an excellent videographer and had tons of experience with kids, and specifically with special needs kids, which is a big issue in the system. And so I called Dan and I was like, hey, I'm going to start this thing. Do you want to make some videos and like not get paid for a while? And he's awesome. So he was like, yeah, let's do it. So Dan just volunteered for the first couple of videos. And then we were able to use those to start to fundraise and to show people like, here's what we're trying to do. Get on board with this. And that worked. We were able to then bring Dan on board. And Dan ended up being on staff with us for 9 years. He just left a year ago. And he still contracts with us, so he's still close. But yeah, it started with just like a phone call to a friend, like, would you volunteer your time? And that yes then led to hundreds of kids.
Why stick with being like a Christian organization? Because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't, my knowledge of this is a little bit smaller, but like if you are a Christian nonprofit, or a faith-based nonprofit even, doesn't that limit like the grants you can apply for or like the money you can receive from certain other agencies that look to support, nonprofits because you are faith-based?
Yes.
Wasn't there a point where like, hey, I can be a Christian and I can do this work, but just for the sake of trying to build an organization, this would make a lot more sense if we were just a secular organization, if you will. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah, we wrestled with that. But it was always pretty clear to me, but tempting sometimes to kind of like, oh man, it would be so nice to just apply for that government grant and not be fundraising. But there's a few reasons why we have not. The first is that I just think it's really important to know your why. And like Jesus is our why. Like our adoption as sons and daughters of God is the why behind why we do this. And I just, if we couldn't talk about our why, I don't think any of it works. And so that was like really important to me, is I want to be able to be clear about our why, the fuel behind why we're doing any of this. That's a part of it. And then secondly, I just really feel a strong conviction. One of the things that Real Hope tries to do is to be a bridge between church and state. And that to us means we're mobilizing the church and we're supporting the state, who is the guardian of these children whose parental rights have been terminated. So we want to be serving them and mobilizing the church to step in. We believe the church should be at the front lines of caring for vulnerable kids, like the very, very front lines, and including financially. And so not only do we believe the church should be doing the work to foster and adopt and support birth families and all of the things that the church is already doing, and we want to see even more of it, we also want the church to be the ones that are like financially supporting this mission. And that's worked for us to be able to do most of our fundraising through the church community, has gotten us to like where we are. It also then allows us to just be a lot more fast moving and agile, because all of our funding is through private donations. It's all through churches, families, individuals, and private businesses. We've never accepted $1 of government funding. And that just allows us to be able to adapt quickly, which is super necessary in a world of working with kids that are in really hard places and going through really tumultuous seasons. It wouldn't be a surprise to anyone to know government money comes with lots of strings attached and tends to move really slow. And we were like, that just isn't going to work for what we're trying to do.
How many no's did you get before you started getting yeses? Because, I mean, it seems like the first county you met with was like, no. And you could have stopped right there, but you didn't.
Yeah.
But then you also hear from these other, the private agencies where they're like, hey, we've tried churches and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Was that your instance or your experience rather, where you say, hey, I want to market to churches, and you're trying to basically like, I'm picturing you cold calling.
Yeah.
Granted, you have some connections because you're working for a church, but were there no's before you got yeses, or what was that growth period? Was there a hump you had to get over before things really started rolling for you?
Yeah, I do think we were able to generate momentum pretty quickly because of a lot of the just relational connections that I had, and because of this woman that trusted us early on to say, like, once we had one kid video made, I think people were like, oh, that's awesome. Because we also had to prove, one, that we knew how to make videos, two, that we knew how to work with kids, but not just kids, with kids that have been through significant trauma and have a really hard time trusting people. And we had to prove that we could talk to those kids who already have a hard time trusting people about something as personal and emotional as family, when their experience of family has come with a lot of heartbreak. And so there was a lot of ways that we needed to prove ourselves. But I think once we could, then word spread kind of quickly within the child welfare space. It took a couple years for us to break into some of the bigger counties in Minnesota. Minnesota runs totally county by county, so in 87 different counties with 87 different foster care and adoption sort of systems. So we just started with the small ones, and we were like, we think we can build relationships with these smaller counties. We can get them to trust us. We can show them what we can do. Because they're often in these rural places, don't have a lot of the same resources that the metro counties have. And so we started there, but it took 3 or 4 years for us to break into some of the metro counties because it just takes a long time to build trust. So we got definitely some no's and some pushback there. And then with churches, we got no's all the time. We still get no's all the time. A big part of our model is that we still try to go to churches as often as we can. We speak in churches and we try to mobilize people to step into adoption and foster care. But it's hard to get into churches. Everybody wants the microphone. The leadership is constantly being asked, like, can we highlight this ministry? Can we highlight this ministry? And so these leaders often are just like, we just have to say no to everybody because otherwise it's too hard to decide. Or we have churches that are like, we love Real Hope. We'd love to do this, but we only partner with churches we only partner with organizations where our congregation can volunteer their time, like Feed My Starving Children, or where there's things for a big group of people to do, which I totally get, and it's just not us. So sometimes we're just not the right fit for different organizations. And we've had to really walk a line of, like we've already talked about, like, what do we mean when we say we're a Christian organization? Yeah. Because we've had some churches say, like, unless you're very, very on the homepage of your website, explicitly Christian, like name of Jesus on the front page of your website, then we don't partner with you. Wow. Or we've had businesses say, like, you're too Christian and we don't want to partner with you. Mm-hmm. And so it's just been an interesting, like, okay, we're not faith forward enough for some and we're too faith forward for others. And that used to kind of throw me topsy-turvy, like, we have to, like, figure out how to please everybody. And it took a couple of years for me to be like, okay, this is who we are. We love the Lord. We are fueled by our faith in Jesus, but we are not evangelizing to kids when we're on their video shoots. We're not like, there's things that we're doing and not doing according to, like, what we feel like God has called us to do. And God will bring the right people to support us and get on board with this mission. And so I've had to just get really clear about, like, here's what we mean. Here's what we're saying. Some churches are going to like that and not like that. Some businesses are going to be totally fine with that or love that or not like that, you know, and just kind of be okay with that.
Let's talk about foster care.
Yeah.
What is the current state of foster care in Minnesota? I mean, how many kids are we realistically talking about that are in foster care that need full-time homes?
Yeah. Well, in Minnesota, on an average day, there are 10,000 kids in foster care. Nationally, there are 400,000 kids in foster care. There's a lot of nuance to that, though, because the goal of foster care is reunification with biological parents. So when kids go into foster care, the hope is that mom and dad will find stable housing, find stable employment, go through rehab, whatever they need to do. Hopefully they do that, and hopefully kids are able to go back home. Different states have different philosophies around how much time mom and dad should be given to be able to kind of stabilize. Minnesota gives families a long runway to be able to stabilize. So of those 10,000 kids, the majority of them are still in limbo. Like, maybe we'll go back home, maybe we'll need to be adopted, we don't know. And so they're stuck in this temporary foster care place. Real Hope only works with the kids that have been in the system for so long and for such severe reasons that their parental rights are legally terminated, which takes a long time and usually there's pretty significant reasons why parental rights need to be terminated. And so we work with a smaller pool of about 1,000 kids in Minnesota who are waiting to be adopted.
I was reading some of the stats in your website. I mean, these kids are higher risk for what?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's wild. Like we said, God designed people to be in families. So when people don't have family, it's not good. 20% of people in our prison systems in the United States consist of adults who aged out of foster care when they were kids. 60% of child sex trafficking victims in the United States spent time in the child welfare system. And that's a conservative number. Some places will tell you it's closer to 90 or 95%. 29% of kids who age out without a family will be homeless by the time they turn 21. I just recently heard a stat that it's 83% by the time they're 26. Like the likelihood of homelessness when you age out without a family is extremely high. Half of all babies that are born to a mother who is in foster care will enter foster care themselves. Rates of addiction are much higher. Mental health challenges are much higher. It is the outcomes when kids age out of the system without a family are pretty devastating.
And that goes back to your friends at the very beginning, when they're giving you these concerned kind of looks, talking about adopting from foster care.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What was the first this is a major success for us?
Ooh.
The first you can remember? Yeah,
fun question. I remember a moment, our third video ever was this sweet girl. And I remember I was on my laptop in my basement, and this email pinged through from our website, and it was just from this mom. And she was like, "Hey, I just came across this video. I'd love to learn more about adopting." And I was like, oh, it was like the first time that one of our videos directly correlated to somebody stepping into the adoption process. And I got so excited. And that girl did end up being adopted. We don't always know we don't know who adopts the child. We only know we get an email from the social worker that says, Susie has been matched with a family. Her video can come down. So that's all we know. But this girl did get adopted, which was super exciting. And then I think there have been some Sundays that when we have shared at churches that have just felt like the Lord is moving in people's hearts, and we get to share, we get to cast this vision for adoption and foster care and why it matters. But there are certain Sundays where it's like kids are going to be adopted because of this Sunday. You could just kind of feel people, feel like God was doing something in hearts. Yeah. And then there's we get to tell forever family stories every year. I'm actually, I get to film one next week with a teenage girl who was adopted by her family. So anytime we're getting to tell those stories is so fun.
Did you ever think that you would end up adopting one of the kids? Because that's a part of your story too.
Yes. Yes. We always knew we wanted to adopt. And then through just learning more about the world of adoption, began to understand it's the teenagers that really get stuck in the system. And so then our heart kind of started growing toward okay, maybe it'll be a teenager. And my husband and I met when I was a youth pastor. We met because he was one of the volunteer leaders. And so we've just always worked with teenagers. Our whole life was kind of built on that we both love teenagers. And so we started getting licensed. This was started Real Hope in 2016. We started the licensing process at around the same time, but it takes a long time. And we kind of took our time getting through all of the licensing classes and training and home study and all the things you have to do. But by September of 2018, we were officially licensed, ready to go. And we were looking for okay, who's the kid going to be and who's God going to bring into our home? And then I went on a video shoot with Real Hope in 2018 and met just the coolest 12-year-old kid in the world. And we played football in a church gym for his video shoot. And I just fell in love with this kid on his video shoot. And I came home and told my husband, I think I maybe met our kid today. And so then when his video was done, I showed it to Pete, and Pete was like, I think he's the one. And so then we started the process, and our son came home. His name's Martez. We call him Tez, or Tezzy Wezzy Bing Bong.
Does he like that one?
He does not. I told his basketball coach, you can call him Tezzy Wezzy Bing Bong if you want to. He was like, no, thank you. So Tez came home February of 2019, and then we finalized his adoption July of 2019, so 7 years ago now. So he's 20 now, which is crazy. He just got his first apartment recently, which is so fun. And he's just the coolest kid in the world.
You guys have exploded the last few years when you look at the scale of your work.
Yeah.
You're now in how many states?
9.
And you started with, you said just the first few.
Yeah.
And what are the numbers we're looking at now as far as the growth? How many videos you've done? How many kids you've impacted? Where are we standing now?
Yeah. So at this point, I think our official number is we've made videos for 733 kids. Just last year alone, we made reels for 160 kids just last year. And so we've seen kind of this like just increasing growth every year. And we have seen 50% of our kids be matched with their forever families so far. And we've seen thousands of families, I don't know what the specific number is, but thousands of families that have stepped into foster care and adoption since we started. So it's pretty exciting.
What's next? I mean, where do you go from there? Is it like, are we thinking like not the McDonald's model, but like you look and you say this could work anywhere, right? And you'd mentioned even when you first got your start, you're at this conference in Colorado, the other states were doing something like this, but is the idea that we can scale the Real Hope Project to all 50 states, or what's the goal?
Yep. So for the first 5 years, we only served Minnesota kids. That was all we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then in 2022, we had a couple staff people who were moving to different states, and both of them said, like, if I could do anything, I would stay with Real Hope, and I would try to get us started in Wyoming and Wisconsin was where they were moving. And I was like, let's just try it. So we kind of tried it more reactively, and it worked. And I was like, I can't believe this is working. And in 2023, I felt like God gave me a heart and a vision to serve 1,000 kids a year. And so that kind of became the vision. Then we started really proactively expanding into these different places and reaching out, and we had different states reach out to us and say, hey, we need this here. Can we get started here? And so for the last 3 years, we've been on this journey of really proactively expanding as much as we can and wanting to get to the place where we can serve 1,000 kids every year. And that has been so exciting. I think we're very much an entrepreneurial organization, in that we're like building as we go, and we're figuring it out as we go. And so even in this last year, I think we figured out a ton, where at one point I thought we were going to need staff people in all these different states, and we were going to need fundraisers and church speakers and all these things in different states. And then we realized we can just be headquartered here in Minnesota, right here in Minneapolis, and we can have the small team that's our HQ staff, and then we can hire videographers, contractors, and shoot leads is what we call them, all around the country, and we can have mobile crews that fly to wherever the kids are. Wow. And so just in the last year, we really restructured from having like on-staff videographers and on-staff shoot leads to like, now we have a team of 20, a shoot crew of 20 spread out all across the country, and we can deploy them to wherever the kids are. And so that's been really exciting and way more cost effective and way more adaptable and flexible. So it feels like as we're going, figuring out the puzzle pieces of how the strategy can work, and then continuing to see pretty exciting growth as that happens.
One of the questions I want to ask, and forgive me because there's no really good way to ask this, is you talked about just the significance of the family system, and how there's no recreating it. Does it feel to you like the government is in some attempts trying to recreate the family system, or trying to piece together something through programs or initiatives that would really not take the place of or replace, but try and fill that gap that's left when that's not there. Yeah. And I guess when you're looking at that, how do you see the work that you're doing kind of either walking alongside of that or just doing the role of that? 'Cause I guess really what I'm trying to ask is, can the government recreate something that can replace the family system? Yeah.
And I would say absolutely not. And I don't even think the government is really trying to, like, I don't think the government was ever in the place to be in the business of creating families. I think it's intended to be this temporary stopgap. Like, we have to get these kids into a safe environment. That takes time. And everybody's goal is family. And nobody wants these kids to be in group homes or institutions, or we have kids that are living in like hospital settings because there just aren't enough homes or families for them. But every social worker is trying to get this kid into a family. And so I do think, the state is set up to where it's like stuck in this place of needing to be a parent to these kids. And that's never what the intention was. It's still not what the intention is. But I think everybody is trying to figure out, okay, how do we move kids into home and family settings as quickly as possible and as safely as possible? Obviously, that's not a decision anybody wants to rush, And so trying to make sure that families are prepared and trained and ready to go, and that it's a good fit and a good match, because this is a lifelong commitment to this kid if you're adopting, Yeah. And so there's a lot of training for these families and a lot that goes into the matching process to match kids with families. But yeah, I do think the more that the church can step up and be involved, we as the church are better positioned to be able to love these kids well and serve them well, because they need relationships, they need connection, and nobody feels like connected to their government, like that's not even the goal of government, but kids can feel connected to their church, connected to families, connected to people.
Do you feel like Christians have gotten too comfortable? I mean, do you feel like your role is to push people out of their comfort zone in a sense?
In some ways, yes. I do feel like part of the goal of Real Hope is to like light a fire under people's butts a little bit and like get them moving. I think one of the things that I'm so proud of and excited about is that Christians do adopt way more than the general public. It's depending on the stats that you pull, or even denominationally, what you look at, it's like 3 to 5 times more than the general public. Like churches adopt like crazy. And so the church already is leading the way. And like that should be celebrated. Like the church has, since our inception, been leading the way in caring for the vulnerable. And that is not always like known or realized or celebrated. And that's huge. And there's so much more to do. And there's too much complacency, and we can do so much more to serve these kids. And so that's kind of the approach we try to take with churches, is like, hey, this is who we are. We're already doing this as followers of Jesus. This is like a part of our identity. This is awesome. And you're called to more. And so like, what does that look like for you? And never wanting anybody to feel pushed into adoption. Like we want that to be the Holy Spirit, like leading people. I don't want that to be me or Real Hope, like pushing people into that. But we do want to kind of open the door to encourage people to like be praying about this, be learning about this. And so that if and when the Lord says go, you have been preparing and you are ready to step in.
I guess my last question is when it becomes a job, how do you stop it from feeling like a job? Because I'm sure for a lot of people, their faith and their job are separate, right? And when they are so closely intertwined, I'm sure it's easy to make your faith feel like work, or you can conflate the stresses of work with your faith, right?
Yeah.
I guess, how do you kind of navigate that? And how has the last 10 years shaped your faith as you're doing this?
Yeah. I would say, so let me go backwards or kind of answer your questions in reverse. I think the last 10 years has shaped my faith in super powerful ways. Just so cool to see the way that God brought this whole organization together, and like a little seed of a dream that was in my heart that I didn't even know was there until it like kind of started to bloom. I remember praying with I was at my church, and we were just starting Real Hope, and it went forward during some prayer time, and one of the leaders was praying for us, for my husband and I. And as he was praying, he just said, hey, I just feel like one of the things God put on my heart is like Real Hope is going to be a national organization someday. And I just remember being like, I don't know if we're going to be an organization tomorrow.
No
like,
pressure.
I don't know if we're going to make it. And then to see that come to fruition. And like, that's one little thread of like thousands of stories like that I could share, of just how God wove all of this together before my mind could even like conceive of it. Like, this was not me making this happen. If it had been on my shoulders, it would not be what it is. And so that's just been like so faith building to see like, gosh, when I felt like I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know the next step to take. Like, he has always been with us and been there, and that gives me so much confidence in like moving toward the future. And then I think around your question about like, faith and work, and when it becomes a job, and I do think that's hard. I think that's hard for probably all of us. of like not letting those two conflate. I do think for me, I have always felt reinvigorated when I get to tell the story. And I think like maybe that's just a personality thing, but like the way that I'm wired, like when I get to talk about our why every time, like there are definitely days when I'm like, oh, I would rather stay home today. Or we hear a hard story about an adoption that fell through, or like a kid that's still not adopted after 3 years and they've been on our website. You know, there's hard days. But when I get to talk about our why, every time it's like the whoosh, like the fire reignites in me. And so I do think like just being so clear about our why and like getting the part of my job being telling our story keeps that fire going, you know?
Oh, I want to connect you to our audience. If people are listening and they say, hey, I want Real Hope to speak at my church, or I want to learn more about what adoption is, or I want to give to Real Hope and support the work that you're doing, what are the ways that people can take that next step?
Yes, you can do all of those things through our website. So therealhopeproject.org, spelled with 2 E's, like a movie reel. Therealhopeproject.org. Follow us on social media. There's places, and really, I know that sounds like so trite, like follow us, like and subscribe on social media, but it really does, it's significant because then you can share the videos that we're sharing, get them out to your network. And if you don't make choices to keep these kids in front of you, it's really easy to forget that they're out there. And so we encourage people like follow us so that you are seeing kids right here in Minnesota who are waiting for families and beyond, and who are waiting all across the country, so that you can be praying for them, so that you can be listening for like, is there a next step for you? So follow us on social media. You can give through our website. You can invite us to your church through our website. And then I would also love to shout out, we have our annual gala, our 10-year anniversary gala.
Let's go.
On October 10th. So it's 10/10 for our 10-year anniversary. Nice. Here in Minneapolis at the Royalston Square. So we'll be sharing more information about that, but we'd love to pack the house for that.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and share. It is so fascinating. And I really do think for people who are listening, I think they'll get something out of hearing your conversation.
So great. Thankful to get to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again so much for listening to this episode of Bigger Than Belief. It has been so fun to share these episodes, but this one was so fascinating because I think it's what this show really can do, right? It can have the journalistic conversation of what we're looking at with foster care in America, or some of the stats that we shared were just so fascinating. I learned something as I was putting this episode together, but also you have the element of faith, right? And how real people's faith can make a real difference in the world. If you like this episode, once more, please share it with a friend. Tell them about us. Say, hey, I heard this podcast. It was really cool. It's this guy, he's a news reporter. He hosts it, but they talk about faith. And I think you'd like the way they talk about faith because it's real and authentic and engaging. If you like this episode, please leave us a review. And again, 5 stars, sharing with a friend, leaving a review, thumbs up on YouTube. That is the #1 way that we can grow. We'll be right back here next Thursday with another brand new episode. We've got some really fun ones coming through the month of July. You won't want to miss the one we've got coming up, especially if you're into sports and athletics. That's coming next week with a really special guest. For now, folks, we'll see you then. In the meantime, be well, and we'll see you very soon.
Love podcasts? Love Minnesota?
Check out the WCCO podcast studio lineup.
Hear the top stories of the day with 4 things to know.
Discover top female athletes and teams from around the state on women in sports.
Dive into stories about faith and belief from your local leaders to your neighbors next door with Bigger Than Belief.
Stay in the know on the go with the WCCO podcast studio. Go to WCCO.com/podcasts.